Question number 3, I think, is another one that was sent out. And it was, if forced to move money in the budget to an area of greater need, what area or areas would you consider reducing funding for?
God, this is like an impossible question.
And if it helps in any way, the intent was that if something were to come along that really needed funding, that's unanimously supported. The question is the funds are limited, so where would that come from to support this thing that was of greater need?
And in reviewing some of that stuff that I've received, obviously, the budget line that takes up the most is wages, right? However, it is a guiding principle of the board that to direct funds basically to frontline supports for the students, right? So if we're moving along the lines of every student succeeds, then sometimes that means some hard decisions in terms of how we funnel those funds. Like, obviously, a key piece of the advocacy is secure funding that is like we can plan for long term. A lot of the funding for all these specialty programs to support students are grants. I actually worked for the district under a grant. There was a 2-year pot of money to pay for me as a social worker. They opted to keep me because they just took funds from a direct teacher position in order to keep me, which they shouldn't have to do. I also know that even Jordan's principal alone has changed, and so that meant the loss of EAs, which is really, really unfortunate. So I think that it would be about trying to make challenging decisions with kind of like impossible answers. My hope is that we can have funding that is more, what's the term I'm looking for? Guaranteed, I guess, predictable, so that we can attract new people, we can keep the skills, and we can keep them for the long term. I don't know if that answers your question or if I went off on a tangent.
Yes.
So I'm going to be honest, I'm not familiar with the structure of Grand Prairie Public yet because I've never worked for them and it's a different environment. But one of my biggest concerns is the amount of money going into central office.
Yeah.
And I see that they just keep expanding at the top when there's a lot of suffering at the bottom, if you want to look at it that way. And I really think central offices need to be, it doesn't mean people are going to lose their jobs. It's just we need to look at what do we need and what don't we need and where can we move people that will be more helpful for children and for schools. And getting teachers into the classrooms. We have a lot of teachers who do important roles in school divisions, but some of them have even said they've become paper pushers. And we need those people in front of kids. And so I think that's something we have to look at. Doesn't mean you're going to change it overnight, but we really need to look at where the funding is going. So that would be one area. And like I say, I haven't seen the budget. I don't know. And until it's in front of me, I can't really give you a definitive answer other than that is something that's on my mind.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a difficult question. Everyone in the division is expected to make evidence-based decisions. And for me to sit across the table from you and say, I'd pick on that and reduce that, doesn't make a lot of sense. I would employ an overall general strategy to this question. I'd first look for additional sources of funding. I'd have a conversation with government. We have this need here. Here's why we need this. Here's the effect of not having this that it has on our division. So can you help us out here? The next, I'd look for reserves. I'd look at doing some sort of benefit cost analysis on both human and non-human resources and make a decision that way. But for me to just finger something here right now and say, it's the directors in the division, or it's this or it's that, I couldn't do that. That wouldn't be fair to the staff. I'd want to do some kind of impact analysis and say, what, if we really have to, what can we do here?
Thank you.
I think that's a question that I can't really honestly answer because I haven't done a deep dive into the budget, so I don't really know. But certainly I intend to request every line item in the budget. And it seems weird that a council or trustees are approving a budget without actually fully seeing the whole budget, right? Besides teacher salaries and maintenance and IT, it's like, well, we should be breaking it down and really looking at what can be cut, because I think monies need to be moved into the classroom is what I'm hearing. More money directly into the schools.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't really like this question either because it. I understand the spirit that it's asking. So it's asking, what are your most important priorities in the division that you would preserve above all else, and what would you cut or get rid of if forced to, like if you didn't have the funding for it. And I mean, at the end of the day, like all of our programs need to be self-supporting. Like our programs of choice, they need to be self-funding with the fees that we assess. But there's so many mechanisms with how we would approach that. I don't think you can ask an individual trustee, what are you going to cut? That's not how our budget development process works. If we have a shortfall, and this year's a good example where we did, right? We didn't have the funding to continue the interventions the early interventions in reading and literacy and numeracy that we were seeing were so effective. And there's a number of ways to manage that, but number one is just starting with an open dialogue with our administration, because they're the experts, right? Like they're the experts in education. They know the best practices. They know what's essential and what possibly could be trimmed. They know, what's the state of our budget, what could be reallocated between different grants. So the board's role in setting our budget isn't in deciding like particular pots of money, like we're going to use this for this. It's setting high-level priorities for the budget. So an example that I would give for this is in our budget this year. I think it was added either that or last year, but I want to say this year. We actually added a budgetary priority for our administration, and it was focusing on equitable funding between schools, because we didn't want to exacerbate any inequalities between different locations among the city. We didn't want to have schools and have remote schools with regards to the resources that were available to them. So, what does equity look like in that? I mean, I couldn't tell you. I'm not an accountant. I'm not an expert in education. I don't know the nuts and bolts of every resource that we have available to us. But we provide that high level direction to the administration, and then they come back and they try to figure out, okay, well, what does that look like? What is the best practice for this? How can we make the will of the board into a reality in the division? And ultimately, that budget was approved with being able to change the way that we were, in some cases, allocating technology, computers, that sort of thing between our schools, making sure that substitutes were divided up as fairly as possible, make sure that we're not making anything worse there as far as our inequalities. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I really don't have a clear answer to, if I had to cut or axe something in the division, what would it be? I think all of the programs we offer are valuable, and there's a number of mechanisms that we could use to address a shortfall there, whether it's, fees, for example, if there's a program of choice that we really want to maintain, but we don't have the funding for it. We could look at different mechanisms to try to maintain those programs to the best extent possible, and sometimes get rid of the ones that just aren't being used. And there's another example that I feel like I should know off the top of my head. I want to say maybe it's like dance as an option or something like that, but there was a program that we just weren't seeing enough enrollment to justify it a couple years ago, so we ended up closing that program. And it's a very responsive feedback loop, but again, I'm not coming in as like a single issue candidate where I think we need to take all of our money away from I don't know, sports. I don't like sports, right? Yeah, that is the soundbite. Get all of our funding out of sport. It's a dialogue with our administration, and it's setting governance priorities to help them do the best that they possibly can to support the division.
Absolutely, thank you.
So this does really relate to funding, and that is a very big question, because it isn't just as simple as sort of moving funds. Now, I might have thought about that before. Well, actually, I wouldn't, because my experience in healthcare and sitting on a number of boards, it's not sort of quite that easy. But I want to tell you that education to me is the most important ministry in government. So if we get the relationship and the funding right, everything else takes care of itself. Now we know that there's challenges around funding, and if you were going to ask me about one of the biggest challenges, I would honestly say it is funding. So we need to ensure that we continue to have adequate funding, and we need to be very deliberate and repeat and be consistent with our message with government. So we consistently have met with our local MLAs and sort of provincially when we have a chance to see the Premier, the Education Minister advocating sort of for funding, because there's not enough. So the question you're presenting to me is really because there's not enough funding. So I think that we have been able to look at sort of targeted funding that supports mental health and sort of careers. But I'm getting to the question, so I really am.
But if it
So,
helps,
yeah,
it might help in that, well, what I envisioned with this was something that came into place that wasn't there before, that we
Right.
all unanimously agree
Yeah.
needs funding.
Yeah.
But now the question is, from the pool,
Mhm.
how are we gonna
Yeah.
make that
Yeah,
happen?
true. And so I guess what I'm getting at is like public education funding is one of our priorities. Like I think we post our priorities everywhere. I carry them in my
Yeah,
purse to
yeah.
anybody, to anyone that will listen. So public education funding is key, but there actually is a process. There's quite a sort of a lengthy process. We work with our senior leadership team. We present a budget. But if in the event that there was sort of a situation that came up where there was something new and there wasn't funding, there is we have a board policy, because that is one of our key things, is that we're governed by policy, and we're designed to set policy, and so there is a policy that we would look at, and we would have to either advocate for additional funding, move additional funding, but there would be a mechanism to do it, is what I'm saying. But it's just, it is a very complex system, and it's simple, but it's not simple.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, thank you,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Oof, such a tough one. You sure I can't just go back and advocate for more? I gotta say, as a community, Grand Prairie rallies pretty hard when there's a need. If there was an emergency,
Yeah.
people would step up, community would step up, businesses would step up, families would step up. We wouldn't let anyone fail. So I know it sounds like the easy answer to say no. And every time I get there's huge budget oversight. It's a huge budget for the entire district. But I'm going to say there's an emergency, something's happened, and something needs to change. Grand Prairie is really good at coming together and making that work. That's the part I'm going to participate in.
Thank you.
That's a tricky question. Our budget's already pretty tight. We're running a deficit budget, and so if I was forced to do that, I would. I don't see a line in the budget that I was like, oh, I wish. I don't think that's needs to be there. So I would ask for scenarios and some data to get a better picture of what we could do to kind of even that out.
And I can't give an exact one, but my idea would be that something comes into place. There's now something
Something new.
unanimously, we agree this needs money.
Sure.
But the pool of money is limited.
Is the same. So I would try and spread it out, because like I said, I don't see a special program. So maybe I would look at professional development at the board, the system, and the school level, and then maybe some of the school generated funds, but the money allocated to schools, maybe lessening that a bit. So we're lessening it across the whole board instead of a specific grade or classroom or school.
So when I saw you sent this question, my first thought was, well, I would have to look at the budget line by line, of course, to see where the money's going, because how would I know what's getting more funding and where the money is needed? And so I decided, you know what, I'm gonna go and look, because I know the budget is online and open, and it honestly didn't take me long to decide right off the bat that we need to cut administration costs. They are astronomical. I was actually quite blown away at what the salaries are, and I don't think, honestly, I can change that just as one trustee, but I believe collectively as a board we could, and I think that would make a huge difference, and we could use that money for more EAs and more teacher support. That would be better used. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I've been thinking about that question a lot. I've yet to step on any board or into that position, thinking and feeling that I know it all. And I am just familiarizing myself right now with all the policies and the board of governance. And I truly feel that I can't give an honest answer to that at this point in time, because I am not familiar enough with the whole budget thing.
Okay.
So I feel that I couldn't give that with any degree of confidence, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Yeah, so again, another really complex question and a really complicated decision to go. I think that as a trustee, I would be one of 7 voices at the table, and we really need to sit and listen, look at all of the situations as to where are some of the challenges and the pinch points. I don't know that at this point I would be educated enough to say we need to cut here and this is what's going to make the difference. I think again, going back to the outcomes of what happens with the labor disruption and kind of the outcomes of the new contract with teachers, I think that will go a long way to kind of dictate some of the changes that we may see in our schools, as well as some leadership suggestions, right? So, and then also making sure that we consult, right? And that we're listening to what's important to teachers and to administration from each of the schools, but then also giving the parents an opportunity to weigh in a little bit on that as well. And where appropriate, talking to the students. So, right, so I think that it's a team approach, but as of right now, I can't really say what would I cut.
Sure. Thank you.
That feels like a trick question. So before we talk about cuts, I'd like to talk about some honest accounting.
Yeah.
I think we should have a shadow budget, like a true cost analysis that calculates what it would actually cost to deliver the curriculum, the program of studies, as per the Education Act and the ministerial order as written. And that would require having teachers determine what they would need to be able to meet the needs of the students in their class together. And then as a school, the principal would have to use their leadership quality standards to determine what they would need, because the minister told me that it is up to the teacher to determine what they need. So I think we should do that. And if we made a list of things we would actually need to deliver that world-class education as described in the documents that we have, we should know what the actual cost is before we decide what we're actually going to fund.
Right.
So if we put those back together, that needs versus funding, I think we would show that there's nothing left to cut.
Okay. Yeah.
Cut it all. There's nothing left.
And I don't have an answer myself.
I know. If you forced me.
Well, the only thing I thought is if there's something completely unexpected and unanimously we agree we need to fund this, but we know the dollars are set. If you had to, and I personally don't have the answer.
One of my pet peeves is that our instructional budget funds people who do not have time in the classroom delivering instruction.
Okay.
So those positions that aren't part of the class size calculation, but they are part of the instructional budget.
And
that might need to have a bit of a look.
Is that our learning support coordinators would be an example of?
Our directors and everything down, yeah.
Okay. Oh, so more central office
A
aspect.
little bit.
Okay. Yeah.
It's coming out of the instructional budget, and that's what they look at us like we have too much money because we've got all of this instructional money and it's supposed to be going into the classrooms. Technically, that would. Yeah, let's look at it.
No, fair enough.